Have you ever picked up a bottle of Coca-Cola and wondered where it really came from? Not the marketing story, not the advertisements, the real story. A story that begins with a Confederate cavalry officer lying in a pool of blood on a street in Georgia in April of 1865. A man with a saber wound through his chest. A man screaming in pain. A man given morphine by an army surgeon because there was nothing else to give. That man was John Stith Pemberton. He survived the wound, but he never escaped what came afterward. The morphine eased his pain. Then it took control of his life. For years, Pemberton searched for a cure. Not for the wound, not for the war, but for the addiction that followed him home. An addiction shared by thousands of Civil War veterans who returned from the battlefield carrying invisible scars. And while Pemberton was fighting his private battle in Georgia, another man was fighting a different war, nearly 800 miles away in the American West. His name was Doc Holliday. You probably know him as the legendary gambler, the gunfighter, the companion of Wyatt Earp, the man who stood at the OK Corral. But before he became a legend, Doc Holliday was a dentist, dying of tuberculosis. Every morning he woke up coughing blood. Every day he searched for something that would make the pain bearable. And just like John Pemberton, he found relief in a small white powder sold openly across America. A powder available in nearly every pharmacy. A powder recommended by doctors. A powder trusted by patients. That powder was cocaine. Today the word sounds shocking, dangerous, illegal, associated with crime and addiction. But in the late 19th century, America viewed it very differently. You could buy cocaine as easily as you buy cough drops today. It appeared in medicines, in tonics, in wines, in syrups, in cigarettes, even in products marketed to respectable families. Doctors called it a miracle. Scientists praised it. Pharmaceutical companies made fortunes selling it. And ordinary Americans welcomed it into their homes without fear, because nobody yet understood the price that would eventually be paid. What happened next is one of the strangest stories in American history. A story that connects a wounded Confederate veteran, a dying frontier gunfighter, a German chemist working in a laboratory thousands of miles away, and a small pharmacy in Atlanta where a desperate man was trying to escape his addiction. Out of that desperation came a drink that would eventually be sold in every corner of the world, a drink whose name is recognized by billions of people, a drink that began as an attempt to solve a drug problem. That drink was Coca-Cola. Tonight we're going to uncover the forgotten history behind cocaine, Coca-Cola, and the Wild West. We'll follow the lives of John Pemberton and Doc Holliday. We'll explore how an ancient leaf chewed in the Andes for thousands of years became one of the most celebrated substances in modern medicine. And we'll discover how an entire nation embraced a drug long before it understood the consequences. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're watching from tonight. And if you enjoy deep historical stories that most textbooks never tell, consider subscribing to the channel. Because this is not just the story of a drug, it is the story of hope, of addiction, of unintended consequences, and of two men whose lives became forever tied to a substance that promised freedom, but delivered something very different. Let's begin. Long before cocaine became a household medicine in America, long before Coca-Cola was poured into glass bottles, and long before gunfighters and Civil War veterans carried it in their pockets, there was only a leaf. A small green leaf growing high in the Andes Mountains of South America. If you had seen it in the wild, you probably would not have given it a second glance. It was ordinary, unremarkable, certainly nothing that looked capable of changing the course of history. The plant was called Erythroxylum coca. For thousands of years, it grew along the mountain slopes of what we now know as Peru, Bolivia, and Colombia. Long before Europeans crossed the Atlantic, indigenous civilizations had already discovered its value. The Inca Empire understood something about the leaf that outsiders would take centuries to learn. Life at high altitude is difficult. The air is thinner. The work is harder. Food is often scarce. Yet generation after generation, Andean workers and travelers chewed coca leaves to help them endure. The leaf reduced hunger. It eased fatigue. It helped people function in the thin mountain air. Modern science has confirmed much of what those ancient people already knew. The coca leaf itself was not a dangerous narcotic. It was a traditional plant used carefully within a cultural system that had developed over thousands of years. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence showing that coca was used at least 4,000 years ago. Mummies discovered in Peru still carried coca leaves tucked between their teeth. The leaf accompanied people in life, and it accompanied them in death. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they were horrified. The practice seemed strange, pagan, even demonic. At first, some Spanish authorities tried to ban coca entirely. But then something happened. They noticed that indigenous laborers working in silver mines could work longer and harder when they had access to coca leaves. The Spanish quickly changed their minds. The leaf that had once been condemned suddenly became profitable. The colonial government legalized coca, taxed coca, and earned money from coca. For the next 3 centuries, the plant remained mostly a South American curiosity, a regional product with little impact on the rest of the world. Then science entered the story, and everything changed. In the 1850s, European chemists became increasingly interested in isolating the active ingredients hidden inside plants. Morphine had already been extracted from opium. Quinine had been extracted from cinchona bark. Scientists believed nature contained countless undiscovered compounds waiting to be unlocked. One of those scientists was a German chemist named Friedrich Godke. Working in Prussia in 1855, he became the first known researcher to isolate the active compound found in coca leaves. The substance appeared as tiny crystals. It represented something entirely new. But almost nobody paid attention. His paper attracted little interest. The discovery seemed like just another obscure chemical experiment. For a few years, the world moved on. Then, a young doctoral student picked up the work. His name was Albert Niemann. He was only 26 years old. Using coca leaves brought back from South America, Niemann refined the extraction process and produced a cleaner, purer version of the compound. Most importantly, he gave it a name: cocaine. It is remarkable how often history changes because of young people working quietly in laboratories. Niemann could not have known that the word he wrote into his doctoral thesis would one day become one of the most famous words in the world. Tragically, he never lived long enough to see it. Only a year after publishing his research, Albert Niemann died at the age of 28. His name faded into obscurity, but his discovery did not. By the 1870s, doctors across Europe were experimenting with cocaine. The results seemed almost miraculous. Patients felt less pain. Surgeons could perform procedures that had previously been unbearable. Dentists found it easier to remove teeth. Eye doctors could operate while patients remained awake. For the medical community of the 19th century, cocaine looked like a wonder drug, a breakthrough, a gift from science itself. And because the dangers were not yet fully understood, enthusiasm spread rapidly. Soon, medical journals across Europe and North America were filled with glowing reports. Doctors praised the drug, pharmacists stocked it, patients requested it. Everyone seemed convinced that a new era of medicine had arrived. But history has a habit of hiding consequences behind early success. What appeared to be a miracle often turns out to carry a price. And no one was about to promote cocaine more enthusiastically than a young neurologist in Vienna named Sigmund Freud. In the next chapter, we'll see how Freud helped transform cocaine from a promising medical discovery into a worldwide sensation, and how America became obsessed with a drug it barely understood. Before we continue, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did you know that coca leaves had been used for thousands of years before cocaine was ever invented? Let me know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this journey through forgotten history, consider subscribing to the channel. We explore the stories behind the headlines, the inventions, and the people who quietly changed the world, often in ways nobody expected. Now, let's continue the story. By the early 1880s, cocaine was no longer an obscure chemical known only to scientists. It was becoming something much larger. Doctors praised it. Medical journals celebrated it. Pharmaceutical companies rushed to manufacture it. And across Europe and the United States, an entire generation began to believe they were witnessing one of the greatest breakthroughs in medical history. One of the loudest voices promoting cocaine belonged to a young Austrian neurologist named Sigmund Freud. At the time, Freud was not yet the famous founder of psychoanalysis. He was simply an ambitious doctor searching for recognition. And cocaine appeared to offer exactly that opportunity. In 1884, Freud published a paper called Über Coca. In it, he described cocaine in almost glowing terms. He believed it could combat depression. He believed it could fight fatigue. He believed it could improve mental performance. Most importantly, he believed it could help people escape morphine addiction. That last claim would change countless lives. Unfortunately, not for the better. Freud genuinely thought he had discovered a solution to one of medicine's most frustrating problems. He even recommended cocaine to friends, colleagues, and patients. For a time, he used it himself. But cocaine was not curing addiction. It was often replacing one addiction with another. The medical world simply had not realized it yet. And because respected doctors endorsed the drug, public trust continued to grow. Soon, entrepreneurs recognized an opportunity. If doctors considered cocaine safe, why not sell it everywhere? Few companies embraced that idea more aggressively than Park Davis and Company of Detroit. Founded in the 19th century, Park Davis became one of America's most influential pharmaceutical manufacturers. Their catalogs reached pharmacies across the nation, and their cocaine products seemed almost endless. Customers could purchase cocaine powder, cocaine cigarettes, cocaine throat lozenges, cocaine inhalers, cocaine tonics, even pre-filled hypodermic syringes containing measured doses of cocaine. Everything arrived neatly packaged, professionally marketed, and completely legal. The advertisements promised extraordinary results. More energy, less pain, greater confidence, improved concentration, relief from exhaustion, relief from nervousness, relief from sadness. To modern ears, the claims sound unbelievable, but in the 1880s, they sounded revolutionary. America was recovering from the Civil War. Thousands of veterans still carried physical wounds. Many more carried emotional scars. The country was expanding westward. Railroads stretched across continents. Factories multiplied. Cities grew larger every year. Everyone seemed to be searching for more energy, more productivity, more endurance. Cocaine appeared to offer exactly that. For a while, it looked like a miracle. And nowhere did that promise feel more personal than in Atlanta, Georgia. Because one of the men watching this medical revolution unfold was John Stith Pemberton. Nearly 20 years had passed since the saber wound at Columbus, but the consequences remained. The pain never fully disappeared. Neither did the morphine. By the 1870s, Pemberton was deeply dependent on the drug. Like many veterans of his generation, he wanted a way out. When reports about cocaine began appearing in medical journals, he paid close attention. Here, perhaps, was the answer he had been searching for, a substance that could free him from morphine, a substance praised by respected physicians, a substance backed by science. So Pemberton did what pharmacists often do. He began experimenting. Behind his pharmacy in Atlanta, he set up a small laboratory. There, surrounded by bottles, chemicals, and handwritten notes, he tested new formulas. He studied the latest European products. He read medical reports. He followed pharmaceutical trends. And one product in particular caught his attention. It was called Vin Mariani. Created by French chemist Angelo Mariani, the drink combined Bordeaux wine with coca leaves. The result was marketed as a tonic that increased vitality and reduced fatigue. Vin Mariani became an international sensation. Some of the most famous people in the world endorsed it. Politicians praised it, writers praised it, religious leaders praised it. Even Pope Leo XIII reportedly carried a flask of the beverage and publicly supported the product. To many consumers, Vin Mariani seemed sophisticated, modern, scientific. It represented the future, and John Pemberton wanted an American version. In 1884, he introduced his own adaptation. The product was called Pemberton's French Wine Coca. It combined wine with coca extracts and was marketed as a remedy for headaches, exhaustion, nervous disorders, and numerous other ailments. The product succeeded. Customers bought it. Sales increased. For the first time in years, Pemberton saw a path toward financial security. It seemed that his experiments had finally paid off. But history often changes because of events nobody anticipates. Not a scientific breakthrough, not a war, not a discovery. A local law. In late 1885, Atlanta passed a prohibition ordinance. Alcohol sales within the city became illegal. Suddenly, Pemberton's successful coca wine faced a serious problem. Its most important ingredient could no longer be sold legally. The business stood at a crossroads. Pemberton could abandon the formula, he could move elsewhere, or he could reinvent the product entirely. He chose reinvention, and in doing so, he unknowingly set the stage for one of the most famous brands in human history. In the next chapter, we'll step inside Pemberton's Atlanta laboratory and watch the creation of a new drink, one that began as an experiment, struggled to survive, and eventually conquered the world. A drink called Coca-Cola. Let's continue. In the winter of 1885, John Stith Pemberton faced a problem that threatened everything he had built. His most successful product, Pemberton's French wine Coca, depended on wine, and now Atlanta had gone dry. For years, he had struggled through pain, addiction, and financial uncertainty. Just when success finally seemed within reach, the law changed. Many men would have given up. Pemberton did not. Instead, he returned to his laboratory behind the pharmacy on Marietta Street. The room was small, crowded with bottles, scales, notebooks, and chemical equipment. This was where he spent countless hours experimenting with formulas, testing flavors, adjusting ingredients, searching for something that could replace the wine. His challenge was not simple. The wine provided both flavor and character. Removing it left a formula that tasted incomplete, bitter, unbalanced, difficult to sell. But Pemberton was persistent. He began experimenting with sugar syrup. He added extracts from the cola nut, a plant native to West Africa known for its natural caffeine content. He continued using coca leaf extracts. Slowly, batch after batch, the formula evolved. No one in Atlanta realized it. No newspaper reported it. No investors gathered outside his laboratory. Yet one of the most important commercial experiments in modern history was taking place in that little room. By the spring of 1886, Pemberton believed he had something promising. The drink was sweet, refreshing, unlike anything else available at the time. And when mixed with carbonated water at a soda fountain, it became even more appealing. There was still one problem. The product needed a name. That responsibility fell to Pemberton's bookkeeper, Frank Robinson. Robinson understood marketing. He believed memorable names mattered. Looking at the formula, he focused on its two most recognizable ingredients, the coca leaf, the cola nut. He combined the names, Coca-Cola. Then he wrote the words together in flowing Spencerian script, elegant, distinctive, easy to remember. The logo he created in 1886 remains recognizable around the world today. More than a century later, billions of people still see a version of Frank Robinson's handwriting. The new product officially debuted on May 8, 1886. The location was Jacob's Pharmacy in Atlanta. Customers could purchase a glass for 5 cents. The syrup was mixed at the soda fountain and served immediately. The first day was not impressive. Only 9 drinks were sold. Total revenue amounted to 45 cents. That was it. There were no crowds, no headlines, no indication that history had been made. If you had walked past Jacob's Pharmacy that afternoon, nothing would have seemed extraordinary. Yet hidden inside those 9 glasses was the beginning of a global empire. Ironically, the man responsible for creating it never truly benefited from its success. The first year was financially disappointing. Advertising costs exceeded revenue. Sales remained modest. The business struggled. Meanwhile, Pemberton's health continued to deteriorate. The morphine addiction remained. The cocaine he believed might help him escape that addiction had not delivered the miracle he hoped for, and an even more serious threat was growing inside his body. He was suffering from stomach cancer. At the time, medicine could do little to help. Pain became a constant companion. His finances worsened. His debts increased. Gradually, Pemberton began selling portions of his ownership in Coca-Cola. A share here, another share there. Each sale provided temporary relief, but every transaction reduced his control over the company he had created. Among the buyers was a businessman and pharmacist named Asa Griggs Candler. Unlike Pemberton, Candler possessed extraordinary marketing instincts. He immediately recognized possibilities others could not see. As Pemberton grew weaker, Candler quietly acquired more shares. Piece by piece, ownership shifted. The future of Coca-Cola was changing hands. On August 16, 1888, John Stith Pemberton died in Atlanta. He was 57 years old. His wife was by his side. His health had been broken by years of pain, addiction, and illness. He died believing his invention might someday provide security for his son, but he never lived to witness what it would become. The irony is difficult to ignore. The creator of Coca-Cola died poor. The product he invented would eventually generate billions. After his death, Asa Candler continued acquiring ownership. Within a few years, he controlled the company. His marketing campaigns transformed Coca-Cola from a local curiosity into a national phenomenon. But there was another detail few modern consumers realize. The original Coca-Cola actually contained cocaine. Not enormous amounts, not enough to resemble modern illegal drug use, but the ingredient was present, and its presence reflected the scientific beliefs of the era. Remember, this was a time when cocaine was still widely regarded as beneficial. Doctors prescribed it, pharmacists sold it, consumers trusted it. Only later would public opinion begin to change. As reports of addiction increased and concerns spread across the country, pressure mounted on manufacturers. In 1903, Coca-Cola began using processed coca leaves, from which most of the cocaine had been removed. Over time, the remaining traces disappeared entirely. Today, Coca-Cola contains no cocaine at all, but its name remains a reminder of its unusual origins, a reminder of a wounded Civil War veteran searching for relief, a reminder of a nation experimenting with a drug it barely understood, and a reminder that some of history's most famous inventions begin with deeply personal struggles. Yet while Coca-Cola was beginning its rise in Atlanta, another Georgian was fighting a very different battle, hundreds of miles away in the American West. He carried cocaine with him everywhere he went. Not to build a business, not to create an empire, but simply to survive another day. His name was Doc Holliday, and his story is every bit as extraordinary as Pemberton's. Let's head west. While Coca-Cola was struggling to survive in Atlanta, a very different story was unfolding on the American frontier. It is easy to remember Doc Holliday as the gunfighter, the gambler, the sharp-tongued companion of Wyatt Earp, the man forever linked to the famous gunfight at the OK Corral. But before he became a legend, Doc Holliday was simply a young dentist from Georgia, educated, well-spoken, respected, a man who seemed destined for a comfortable professional life. Then came the diagnosis: tuberculosis. In the 19th century, those words carried a terrifying weight. There was no cure, no antibiotics, no reliable treatment. Patients often spent years slowly wasting away. Many never reached middle age. The disease had already taken Holliday's mother. Now it was coming for him. At just 22 years old, he was told to leave Georgia and head west. Doctors believed the dry desert air might slow the disease. It would not save him, but it might buy him time. So Holliday packed his belongings and left home. He never returned. From Texas to Colorado, from New Mexico to Arizona, he drifted across the frontier, searching for opportunity, money, and perhaps a little more life than doctors believed he had left. Along the way, he abandoned dentistry and turned to gambling. Cards became his profession. But gambling was not what kept him going. Chemistry did. Like thousands of Americans suffering from chronic illness, Holliday relied on medicines readily available at local pharmacies. Among them was cocaine. Today, the image sounds shocking. Yet in the American West, cocaine was not hidden in dark alleys. It sat on pharmacy shelves. It appeared in medical catalogs. Doctors prescribed it. Druggists sold it. For tuberculosis patients, cocaine was often promoted as a way to ease coughing and throat pain. Laudanum, a tincture containing opium, was commonly used as well. Together, they helped patients endure symptoms that medicine could not cure. By the time Holliday arrived in Tombstone, Arizona in 1880, he was already fighting a losing battle against disease. Witnesses described him as painfully thin. His face was pale. His cough never seemed to stop. Some mornings he woke up coughing blood. Yet despite his condition, he became one of the most famous figures in Western history. The irony is remarkable. The man, celebrated as a fearless gunfighter, spent much of his adult life battling his own body. Then came October 26, 1881, the gunfight at the OK Corral. 30 seconds that would become legend. Shots rang out, men fell, history was made, and Doc Holliday secured his place in the mythology of the American West. But legends often hide uncomfortable realities. The real Holliday was not an invincible gunslinger. He was a dying man surviving one day at a time, a man who knew his future was limited, a man who depended on medicines his society believed were helping him. As the years passed, his condition worsened. The coughing became more severe. His strength faded. The disease slowly consumed what remained of his body. In 1887, seeking relief, Holliday traveled to Glenwood Springs, Colorado. The town's mineral baths were advertised as beneficial for tuberculosis patients. Like so many treatments of the era, hope exceeded reality. On November 8, 1887, Doc Holliday died in a hotel room. He was only 36 years old. The legendary gunfighter did not die in a shootout. He did not die on horseback. He did not die with a revolver in his hand. He died quietly in bed. 1 year later, John Pemberton would die in Atlanta. Two Georgian men, a pharmacist and a dentist, both shaped by pain, both dependent on the same drug, both living in a nation that believed cocaine was medicine. Before we continue, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which story surprises you more so far? John Pemberton, the inventor of Coca-Cola, or Doc Holliday, the dying gunfighter of the Wild West? Share your answer in the comments. And if you're enjoying these forgotten stories that connect famous names to surprising truths, consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us keep uncovering the hidden chapters of history, one story at a time. Because the most important part of this story is still ahead. America was finally beginning to realize that its miracle drug might not be a miracle at all. And when that realization arrived, it changed the country forever. For more than half a century, cocaine had been welcomed into American life. Doctors prescribed it, pharmacists sold it, companies advertised it, families trusted it. What began as a scientific discovery had become a national habit, and for many years, almost nobody questioned it. But eventually, the cracks began to appear. Patients who had once praised cocaine started showing signs of dependence. Doctors noticed troubling patterns. Communities began reporting cases of addiction that could no longer be ignored. The miracle was beginning to lose its shine. And as often happens in history, society's understanding changed far more slowly than the problem itself. By the 1890s, concerns about cocaine were spreading across the United States. Newspaper stories appeared describing addiction. Medical journals became more cautious. Politicians started paying attention. The same drug that had once been promoted as a cure for exhaustion, depression, and morphine addiction was increasingly being viewed as a danger. A generation earlier, physicians had celebrated it. Now, many were warning against it. One of the first states to act was Colorado. In 1897, lawmakers introduced restrictions on cocaine sales. Other states followed. Georgia tightened regulations. California imposed prescription requirements. New York introduced its own controls. The changes came slowly, but they kept coming. The era of unrestricted cocaine was ending. Meanwhile, the men whose stories brought us here were already gone.
Doc Holliday had died in 1887. John Pemberton had died in 1888.
Neither lived long enough to see public opinion turn against the drug they had relied upon. Neither lived long enough to see America admit it had been wrong. Finally, in 1914, the federal government stepped in. Congress passed the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act. For the first time in American history, cocaine and opiates became subject to nationwide regulation. The change was enormous. A man could no longer walk into a local pharmacy with a few dollars and walk out with cocaine powder. The mail-order catalogs disappeared. The advertisements vanished. The shelves were cleared. An era had ended. When historians look back, one number stands out: 54 years. Only 54 years passed between Albert Niemann naming cocaine in 1860 and the federal government deciding strict controls were necessary in 1914. A single human lifetime. That is how quickly a scientific breakthrough became a national obsession, and how quickly that obsession revealed its consequences. Yet perhaps the most fascinating part of this story is what survived. Not the medicine, not the advertisements, not the promises. The name survived. Coca-Cola survived. The cocaine was gradually removed, the formula changed, the ingredients evolved, but the brand endured. Today, billions of people recognize the famous red logo. Most have no idea that its origins trace back to a wounded Civil War veteran searching desperately for relief from pain and addiction. Most have no idea that the drink's name preserves a connection to a drug that once sat openly on pharmacy shelves across America. And that is what makes this story so remarkable. It is not really a story about cocaine. It is a story about human nature, about hope, about desperation, about unintended consequences, about the powerful desire to find a solution to suffering. John Pemberton believed he had found one. Doc Holliday believed he had found one. Thousands of doctors believed they had found one. Millions of ordinary people believed it too. They were not foolish. They were not villains. They were people working with the knowledge available to them at the time. History is filled with moments like this. Moments when society embraces something new before fully understanding the cost. Moments when confidence moves faster than caution. Moments when the future looks brighter than it truly is. The story of cocaine in the Old West is one of those moments. A leaf chewed in the Andes for thousands of years. A chemist's discovery in Germany. A pharmacist's experiment in Atlanta. A dying gunfighter crossing the frontier. A nation searching for relief. All connected by a small white powder that promised tired people a better tomorrow. For a while, America believed that promise. And for a while, America was wrong. That was the age of the cocaine cowboys. And that is how the story ends. As we close tonight's story, it's worth remembering that history is rarely as simple as villains. John Pemberton was not trying to build a global empire. Doc Holliday was not trying to become a legend. One was searching for relief from pain. The other was searching for a little more time. Yet their lives became connected by a drug that an entire nation once believed was medicine. A belief that shaped industries, fortunes, and countless lives before the truth finally emerged. If you enjoyed this journey into one of history's most surprising stories, let me know in the comments. What historical myth or forgotten event should we explore next? And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and join us for more forgotten stories, hidden histories, and the remarkable people who changed the world in ways they never imagined. Until next time, thank you for watching. Sleep well, and remember, history is often stranger than fiction. Good night.